big American-made pickups. They're bigger than Texas, and they're kind of more divisive than a red baseball cap at the moment. But this is the Silverado 2500 heavy duty, and it's just been facelifted. And the reason it's been facelifted is because in the States, there's a bit of an arms race going on. And I'll show you what I mean.
But before we go anywhere, what's new about this truck and what's its value for money story like? The upgrades are mainly in the engine bay, which we'll get to, the interior and a few external changes. Those start with the new front and rear fascias and headlights, and then move into the cabin with new touchscreen tech, classier black leather trim and a beefier Bose stereo. The carryover gear includes things like the powered tailgate, 20-inch alloy wheels, sunroof, heated and ventilated front seats, tub liner and even a powered rear windscreen. The good news is the GM has held the price right where it was, but even so, $163,000 is still a decent chunk of change. And there's only one trim level, it's called the LTZ Premium. Visit CarsGuide and check out the written review for all the details. There are some really clever elements in the final design of this vehicle, starting with the safety stuff like adaptive cruise control that recognises that there's a trailer on the tow ball and stretches the following distances to suit. The Silverado remains a ladder chassis design with the body plonked on top, but there's dual range 4-wheel drive, including a permanent 4x4 setting that is an absolute godsend when towing or on a slippery road, or both. The other interesting thing is that the HD can be driven on a car licence and has a payload of 733 kilograms if you do so. But if you have your truck licence, the same vehicle can then carry 1,386 kilograms in the tray. Either way, the towing limit is 4.5 tons. And let's not forget, the Silverado was built in the US, then shipped to Australia, where it's pulled to bits and converted to right-hand drive. That starts to explain the price a little.
Let's have a look at the inside of this thing, because this is where a lot of the facelift money has gone. There's now a big central screen, 13 inches wide, works very well. It's a touchscreen, and there is a lot of menu-driven stuff in this car. I wouldn't say it's tech-heavy in the way that a luxury car is, but there's certainly a lot more going on than most people would expect from a ute. And that's all down to the safety and the creature comforts that North American buyers expect. So that's all here. There's selectable modes for the dashboard display, for instance, and you've got to scroll through a few menus and press a few buttons to arrive at the one you want. There's tyre pressure monitoring, great safety initiative in this vehicle, and it's actually can be tied to tyre pressure monitoring in an optional way on the trailer, so it will let you know if the trailer's tyres have gone flat or are in fact getting hot, which is a huge safety issue, because when you're towing something, you really don't know what's hanging off the back or how it's travelling back there sometimes, until it's too late and the tyre delaminates and shreds and you're off into the scrub, jackknifed and upside down and on fire. Not ideal, suboptimal. This vehicle, however, does cover off all those bases. Now, the interior quality is actually really good too. In the context of North American utes, it's probably one of the best around, and that's because traditionally they've been pretty awful. Early Ford F-150s and Chevy Silverados had some really crappy plastics. They were generally dreadful. This is so much better, it's not funny. And the utilities here too. There's cup holders a go-go. There's a big deep center console. This is an absolute 5-seater. Make no mistake about that. There's tons of legroom in the back. There's USB ports everywhere, climate control air. There's a sunroof. I mean, that's reflected in the $163,000 price too. You know, so obviously Chevrolet had to spec this car up, or GMSV in Australia had to spec this car up to justify what was always going to be an expensive vehicle by the time it was converted here to right-hand drive in Australia. So they've gone for the doctor with the options box and basically ticked everything. So it is one with a lot, but the upshot of that is that you get 10-way electrically adjustable front seats. The front seats are heated and ventilated. Ventilated seats. What would we do without those? So it's one with a lot. The interior is actually quite workable and of decent quality for a change. The other thing I like about the interior is that it's got a column shifter. Now, that's optional. You can actually have a T-bar in the center console if you want. If you think that makes it a sporty truck, beats me. I'll go for the column shift every day. The only catch here is ergonomically, it's not actually as good as it could be. It's not exactly a two-handed operation, but the spring in the thing is quite stiff, so you've actually got to physically haul it into the movable plane, and it takes a bit of muscle to do. And it's not as accurate. It doesn't click into gears. It's kind of got a furry sort of feel to it. But it does work, and it does free up space in the rest of the interior. So you definitely go for that.
The arms race I'm talking about deals with torque. American truck manufacturers and their customers have decided that they like lots of torque. So now the race is on to out-grunt each other, and they're all having a crack. This is Chevy's response. It's a 6.6 litre turbo diesel V8 called a Duramax. Now, it makes 350 kilowatts. And that in itself is pretty amazing. That's near enough to 470 horsepower. But it's the torque figure, the Newton meters, that is the headline act. Go on, have a guess. 700, 800, 900 Newton meters? You're not even close. 1,332 whopping great Newton meters of torque. It's an amazing thing. We just have to go for a drive now.
Okay, so driving the thing. Well, the first thing you've got to do is get your head around how much real estate this thing occupies. It's big, there's no two ways about it, and that's going to put a lot of people off. I know people who would not drive this thing for 20 quid a week at Free Tucker because it's just so big, they won't go near it. However, once you make that mental leap and you jump in, I won't say it shrinks around you because it doesn't, but it becomes somewhat less intimidating, I reckon, because you can see out of it. It's got fantastic camera systems. There's a 360-degree camera view. There's great reversing cameras, and that's all linked in with the towing package, so you can see what the trailer's doing. You can back up to the tow ball. There's a camera over the tow ball, so you can line up your trailer. All those things are designed to make it less intimidating, and they do work. There's no two ways about that. I guess the highlight here for me is this Duramax 6.6 litre V8 engine. It is an absolute honey. If you like diesel engines, you're going to love this one. It sounds like a miniature Kenworth, but it really hauls. The 1,332 Newton meters is just incredible. And even though this car weighs, I mean, it's getting on for 4 tonne empty. Certainly by the time you filled the tank and put a couple of big blokes in it, it would be a 4 tonne proposition. You would never know it. This thing just trucks on. The 10-speed Allison gearbox does a fantastic job. The shifts, you can hear it shift, but you can't feel it shift. It's that good. And it's all pretty heavy duty stuff. The leaf spring rear end means the ride is a little bit firm with nothing in it, but it's quite well matched to the front end. And for a change, instead of a solid live front axle, the rear axle's live, but the front axle in this is actually independent suspension. And that means it steers much better and it doesn't porpoise down the road too badly. It's just a more civilized way of doing it. And I really can't help but think that if they can get people to drive this thing, they'll soon realise that it's not the big bad monster that you know a lot of people think it is. I mean, I'm in some pretty tight little roundabouts here, and yes, you have to be careful where you put your wheels, but you get a great view through the camera. You can program it so that when you turn the indicator on, the camera looks down that side of the car and gives you a great view of what's going on. It's just that they've thought it through, and that's typical of North American cars. Actually, I have to say, over the years, the convenience features that we've seen from stuff out of the US, even though the cars themselves might have been a little bit ordinary, the convenience stuff and the attention to detail is pretty good. It has been good for many years. Of course, what everyone wants to do with this vehicle is tow big heavy trailers. Now, we did get a chance yesterday to tow a 3-tonne caravan, and apart from a reduction in ride quality because the weight of the caravan on the tow ball suddenly made the rear suspension drop down onto its firmer setting, it picked up more of the leaf spring, if you will. Apart from that, you wouldn't have known this thing had anything on the tow ball at all. The performance was barely blunted. This thing has just got so much torque, it's incredible. And what you find too is with this gearbox, there's a gear for every gear ratio for every occasion. So, and you don't have to worry about it. It's got enough smarts to just work out what gear it needs to be in, and away you go. This vehicle's also got permanent all-wheel drive with a center differential, so that means you can stay in 4-wheel drive on dry bitumen. And when you're towing, that is absolutely a huge bonus. Even if all you're doing is driving around on a wet road, the advantages of having it in 4-wheel drive all the time are enormous, and it's a great safety feature. And you know, more manufacturers should look at it, I think. General Motors has gone away from the live front axle, the solid front axle that a lot of these cars have, and they've gone to an independent front suspension, which means it steers much more neutrally and much more naturally. And even though it's still a monster, it's still a whopper, it actually goes where you point it, and it does so even on a bumpy road. And traditionally, bumpy roads on cars sprung as stiffly as this for load carrying aren't a great mix. They're not a happy combination. But in this case, because of that front end, it's actually okay. Not saying it's a limousine, but I am saying you can bomb it down a fairly ordinary road at a fairly decent speed and not have to worry too much about landing in a tree with a koala for company. And that, traditionally, has not always been the case with vehicles like this.
As it stands, there's no official word on fuel economy from GMSV, but we can tell you that the fuel tank is a purposeful 136 litres, which should give you a range of about 800 or 900 kilometres of highway driving. There's also a 26.5 litre AdBlue tank that needs filling as well, so factor that into your running costs. Towing safety is a big focus with this vehicle, and there are electronics on board to give you every conceivable view of the vehicle, the load and the surroundings, as well as if all the lights are working, for instance. Driver aids include autonomous emergency braking that works up to 80 kilometres an hour, stability control, cross-traffic alert, lane keeping warning, forward collision warning and plenty more. There are also 6 airbags, including curtain airbags for everybody in an outboard seat. The vehicle has not been tested to ANCAP standards, and GMSV has no intention of doing so. Service intervals are every 12 months or 12,000 kilometres, which is a bit more frequent than some of the petrol-powered opposition. The factory warranty is also off the pace, relatively speaking, with just 3 years or 100,000 kilometres of cover. GM does not offer cap price servicing and has no intentions of doing so in the future.
So it comes down to the question of, should you buy it? Well, it's a lot of money, 163 grand, but boy, it's a lot of truck. I guess, and I keep coming back to this, if you have a legitimate need for this vehicle, and that need, that perceived need, does not include the words fashion statement, then by all means. If you're going to buy it as a fashion statement, I reckon by week 2, you're going to be regretting your choice. You're going to hate the thing, because it does require, in some cases, 2 parking spots. It does require planning ahead in traffic. It does require you to have a larger input in what happens day to day, okay? You need to understand that. But if you do need to move stuff, and you know, a lot of us do, a lot of tradies now tow big bobcats and big trailers, and a lot of recreational users have huge caravans that weigh 4 tons, then this is probably a pretty good way to go. And I think it's better than possibly the petrol versions. And the reason for that is 1,300 newton meters. You can't get away from it. You can't get around it. It's a fact. It's a torque monster. And with a 10-speed auto, it hauls anything.